Hi YouTube, I'm back today to do something that I said back in the summer, last summer, when I did my first one, was going to be regular, and then it did not become regular, so now I'm hoping to make it monthly or every other month, and that is a reading vlog. I'm here to do my March reading vlog, so I'm just going to tell you about what I'm reading at the moment and some things I have recently finished and loved. So, I am a serial reader, like I read 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books at once. I'm almost never actually reading one, although over the weekend just gone, I did read 2 books back to back and finish them both, which was kind of unheard of. It was a very good weekend of reading, and that's what not being on social media will do for you, I think. So yeah, this month I haven't been on social media. I haven't been on social media since the beginning of Lent, and it's freed up a lot of time, I think. I'm not sure how that it's actually made my brain feel better, but I'm feeling less fragmented, so I guess that's a good thing. I'm focusing more, but I am missing social media, so I'm quite excited to get back to it. But anyway, without further ado, my reading pile is not entirely indie at the moment, so I'm reading a couple of secret things I can't tell you about for the summer reading box. If you're not on the waiting list for our summer reading box, then you should go to ninjabookbox.com and you will see the pop-up come up about the waiting list for the summer reading box and the book advent calendars. So that will be there because we're doing some very exciting things with the summer reading box this year. We're slightly revamping it, and if you want to know more about that, you should join our newsletter as well. So I'm reading some secret things for that I can't tell you about yet. But here are the things that I'm reading that I can tell you about. So this is why this is less indie than it would otherwise have been, because I can't tell you about the things. So I am currently reading, this is the indie thing on this pile, I think. Tea is So Intoxicating by Mary Essex, which is part of the British Library Women Writers series, which I've talked about a little bit before. If you had our last September's box, A Battle of Wills, that contained My Husband Simon by Molly Downs, which is also in this series. And they are kind of similar in feel to Persephone books. I recommended them in my 5 favourite Persephones video, which you can see. I'll put the link in the description for that if you haven't watched it yet. And these are writers who were very well known in the period they were publishing and have since been forgotten. Obviously, the British Library is fantastically placed to be able to republish all these kinds of forgotten things. Their Crime Classics range is really worth checking out as well. We've got quite a lot of them in our shop. But this is about a man and his wife, although it's very scandalous because they weren't married when they moved there and she is divorced and then they get married. But anyway, they move to this house and they want to start a tea garden and the whole village gets involved. I'm just a bit more than halfway through and it's very kind of gossipy and how people use their wiles on each other to get people to agree with what they want. And they start this tea house. They haven't quite opened it yet, actually, where I'm at in the book. And so the main characters are, David is the guy who's decided it's a great idea to start this tea house, and Germaine is his not wife, who is kind of dragged along with the idea because she married him. So, but then they employ this very attractive young Austrian cake cook called Mimi, who has legs. And all the men in the village are won over by Mimi's legs. So I really love it, actually. I'm really enjoying it. And this is about the 4th one in this series I've read, I think, and I've really enjoyed all of them. So I will be reviewing that on the blog. So look out for that on the Indie Book Network. So that's Tea is So Intoxicating by Mary Essex. Then on to the non-indie things. For Read Christie 2021, I'm still on February's book, which I'm going to finish soon. It's like a lot of little short stories. It's Pyne Investigates. And it's actually really nice because for Agatha Christie, it really doesn't have very much murder in it at all. It's mostly kind of... So Pyne is sort of PI? He's not really. I don't know what to call him. But he basically has this advert in the paper that says, are you happy? If you're not happy, contact this guy. And then he tries to make people happy. So he finds out like why they're not happy and tries to kind of set it right, often using like lots of elaborate kind of sets and actors and things. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm going to finish this, and then March's book is Lord Edgware Dies, which I know I've read before, and I've got that on the stairs ready to go after this. If anyone's interested in joining in, this is a really fun year of reading Agatha Christie books. I'm reading the ones that they've set for the prompts, but you can kind of choose whatever you want, and obviously she's got loads of books to choose from. I'm going to try and get hold of newer editions going on forwards though, because there's a lot of like word choices that I wouldn't think are the best choices, and they're probably not in newer editions. So yes, That's Pyne Investigates. I've nearly finished that. I'm also reading some fantasy, which is not indie as well, sorry, at the moment. And I'm on the second book of the Grisha series by Leigh Bardugo, which is Siege and Storm. So these are like the prequels to Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I read years ago and really, really loved. Like, they're super amazing and you should all read them immediately. My sister's stolen my books, so I can't reread them, which sucks. But I finally decided enough time had gone past to start reading the Grisha series, and I had thoughtfully collected the trilogy for myself so that I could just read them straight through. I read the first one in a day a few weekends ago, and now I'm on this. And this is about a girl called Alina, and she discovers that she's magic, and she is part of the Grisha, who are like the sorcerers of this world that this is set in. And she's very, very powerful, and a sun summoner, which is really unusual, and all kinds of things happen after that. So we're in the midst of trials and tribulations and people not being who they say they are and all that with this. So I'm really enjoying that too. And I'm, again, a little bit more than halfway through, seeing a trend here. I'm a little bit more than halfway through all of them. So before I left Twitter, before I took my Twitter break, I was having a chat with somebody about I Capture the Castle, which I realised that I was obsessed with as a teenager. I think I read it 6 or 7 times, and then I haven't read it since. And so since our library is finally open for click and collect again, it'd been a year since I'd been, and I was like the most nerdy the first time we went back. I ordered I Capture the Castle into the library. This is, there are indie versions of this, so there's a beautiful Folio Society edition of this. This is not indie, this is vintage, but it's lovely as well. So I Capture the Castle. I'm still in the very early bits of it, but basically it's written by the protagonist. The protagonist is a 17-year-old girl, Cassandra, and it's kind of about her and her family. They live in this ruined castle. They've got no money, and it's kind of about them trying to work out how they're going to afford to live, really, and what her future entails. And she's writing the book as practice to be a writer. So I remember loving it a lot as a teenager, but like all I remembered about it was that her name was Cassandra, basically. So yeah, I'm rereading this. And I will let you know what I think about it, I think, because even though it's not indie, it's an old favourite. So I may well film an anxiety and rereading video about this one, and that's I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. And then, okay, so that's everything I'm currently reading. The next thing I'm going to read, very excited about this, comes out I think next month. It was pushed from last year, and it is The Starlings of Bucharest by Sarah Armstrong. And it's not a sequel to The Wolves of Leninsky Prospekt, but it is set in the same era, and it's also kind of Cold War era, Russia, Eastern Europe. So I am really looking forward to reading that. If you didn't get our 2019 September box, which the book was The Wolves of Leninsky Prospekt, and I'd really recommend reading that because it's brilliant. So I'm very excited about this, and thank you very much to Sandstone Press for sending me a copy of this. I'm going to read that next. So I wanted to quickly talk about the 2 books I finished over the weekend, which are going to be our March books of the month. So I'm writing a bit about them on our blog, and they'll be in our newsletter that's going out, or has gone out potentially when this video goes up. So over the weekend I read Where Stands a Winged Sentry by Margaret Kennedy, which comes out on the 23rd of this month from Handheld Press. And they sent me a copy for review, and I will be talking about it on the blog, as I've just said. This is amazing, this book. I want to say a lot of good things about it, and I'm probably going to make its own video, but it's Margaret Kennedy's diaries from 1940, 1941. So like, just as the Second World War started getting really bleak and serious, and like there was a point at which everybody thought Britain was going to lose, and this is kind of when this diary is from. And it's really, I don't know how to describe it. I said to my husband, it's because she is probably, I would be in the same situation as her now if there was to be this kind of situation, except without the servants, because they're quite well off in the beginning of this. But she kind of moves with her kids and a friend's child that she's looking after, and they go to Cornwall, to the coast of Cornwall, to live in a town there. And I just loved it. It's really funny, like surprisingly funny. I kept reading my husband bits of it because it's just her observations on like everyday life. And so it goes between I'm terrified, how can we live like this, and my children were better off not being born if Hitler wins. And then it goes to a bit where she takes a load of refugees down to the sea, but they're not allowed to bathe, so she runs up and down on the shoreline like a dog, keeping them away from the sea, which was just like some of the imagery, and it's hilarious. So yeah, I will write a fuller review of this, but I really recommend it. Even if you think you don't like diaries, you don't like war writing, whatever, it's really interesting. And her voice is really funny and really true, I think. It's an interesting perspective as well, because we hear a lot about either end of the war, but not kind of the depressing middle bits, I think. And yeah, there's a lot about like everyday life and stuff that I know about from Bedknobs and Broomsticks, like when they painted over all the signs in rural areas so no one knew where anyone was going because they were waiting for a German invasion basically and trying to stop that from happening. So this is fantastic. 5 stars, highly recommend. It's Where Stands a Winged Sentry by Margaret Kennedy, and I believe if you go to the Handheld Press website you can pre-order that now. Really recommend doing that. Go pre-order. Okay, and the other book of the month, I had to choose 2 because this month Show Us Who You Are by Elle McNichol came out, which is her second book. Her first book is A Kind of Spark. And I love this author so much. I think I'm just going to buy everything she writes ever. She is a neurodivergent author, and she both her books so far have had autistic girls as main characters. This book is about Cora, who is 12, and she meets a boy called Adrian and very quickly makes good friends with him, which is very unusual for her. She sort of doesn't feel like she fits in at school, and she really wants to be an investigative reporter, but the teacher in her school doesn't think that she'll be able to handle the pressure of being on the newspaper, whatever, because she's you know, different. And it's beautiful. It made me cry. A Kind of Spark made me cry too. But they're more like, this book is so much about being okay, being who you are, and about people around you being okay with you being who you are. And I think it's such an important thing that we should all be able to do, and so many people feel that they're not able to do it, and that's a problem. Elle McNichol writes beautifully, and she writes really truthfully, I think. And I love the perspective of her protagonists, and I think it's something that we all need to hear. So I really recommend you go and buy this. This is Show Us Who You Are by Elle McNichol, and it's published by Knights Of. So that is indie. Yeah, and you'll hear lots more about that in the newsletter and on the blog and all of that. But yes, hugely recommend these. So those were the ones I finished. That's everything I'm reading at the moment, what I'm going to read next, and what I've just read. So I think that about does it. Like I said, I'm going to try and keep these to monthly or every other month, just to give you a little bit of update. So you can see that, like, even though everything we do at Ninja Book Box is indie, everything I read is not indie. I read a massive variety of things. And I just hope that this will give you an opportunity to hear about some other titles. So if you haven't, subscribe, please. Because we love you to get all the notifications about all our videos. We're trying to do more and more of them. So I will see you again soon for another one.